how Dr. Richard would want to coordinate the next 45 or 50 minutes, right? So I'm going to welcome Dr. Richard. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Dr. Richard, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the generous introduction, G. So I'm going to share my screen. Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks to all of you who have joined in today for this conversation. What I'm going to do in the way that I discuss these environmental and sustainability issues is to make them relatable to the realities that we face today. And first of all, I like to always start off with what can make this discussion quite very easy to understand. And one of the aspects is that a story of two prominent hunters who went hunting for a deer, and they hunted for days without success. And one day, as they were about to despair, actually what happened was that they came across a freshly killed deer, which was hidden in the bushes. So the more experienced hunter, what he did was that he sprang into action and rushed into the bush to secure that meat that they've seen. But in no time, there was a scream, a timid scream from one of his friend, the other hunter, who was running away, shouting that he's seen a big lion that was guarding the deer. But however, this guy did not shake, he did not run away, and that evening, the village had something to feast on, which was a fresh deer meat, thanks to him, because he didn't run away. Why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because if you look at the realities in which we live on Earth today, and especially in the African continent, I would like to ask, what do you think distinguishes these two people? Who one had to run away because you saw a lion, and you will notice that there are two attributes that distinguish these two guys. These two attributes are boldness and preparedness. Why do I say so? I say so because winners are bold and always prepared, and this is my message to you today as we get into the conversation of the business of sustainability, looking at the key enablers and the space and place of young people like you who are studying. Winners are bold and always prepared. And this is the reason that we look at circular economy, which is considered the biggest economic opportunity on Earth since the Industrial Revolution. It is valued at 1 trillion in just 2 years, that's in 2025 from today. And in 7 years, it's valued at 4.5 trillion US dollars. And so only the most prepared and the bold can be able to tap into these opportunities. But when you put it in the perspective of the African continent today, which the opportunities are quite immense, circularity, especially in the waste sector alone, can help create 8 billion of economic opportunities from a continent which recycles only about 4% of waste. Yet, up to 70% of recyclable waste is not recycled. And in the built environment, when you're talking about African cities, you're talking about the cities that are growing twice as fast as compared to the globe. You're talking about energy needs. All these aspects are presenting opportunities. And you're talking about African biofertilizer market that is projected to increase at a compound annual rate of 5.9% between now and 2025, just in 2 years, to substitute up to about 50% of chemical fertilizers. A small plant for agricultural waste can employ over 200 young people as we speak today, and at the same time supply over 4,000 farmers. These are aspects that are not even below. This is where the jobs are going to be. So, colleagues, as you're listening, one of the core revenue earners for the continent is the export of minerals, export of metals. We know that for a fact that Africa exports employment and imports unemployment in every aspect, in every facet of life. And that we know. If you're a citizen of this continent or happen to have been in this continent, you will be able to be savvy with these facts, whether it is food that over 43 billion is used to import food into the continent as we export employment, whether it is raw materials, not processed, but exported in raw form and imported back into the continent. And so why I'm saying this is that the core revenue earners for the continent is the export of minerals. However, because of circularity, the continent is facing increased competition. And why I say this is that just imagine up to 85% of recoverable precious metals in e-waste, electronic waste, specifically printed circuit boards, is in gold and Africa's most prominent metal, which we know, in addition, electronic devices, for example, have been miniaturized, made smaller, which means that they use less raw materials. So in a world where circularity in mineral processing becomes the norm, Africa will continue to lose revenue from raw mineral exports. This is something that you should have at the back of your mind. And that takes me to the aspect of the region, which, as we are speaking today, needs investment in urban mining. Africa generally needs investment in urban mining, which is the extraction of precious metals from e-waste. Currently, the amount of precious metals recoverable from e-waste, as we speak today, done across the entire globe, is estimated at $57 billion US every year. In Africa, recovery can be over 11 billion from recycling and extracting these precious metals from waste smartphones alone. That's an opportunity, but just one facility undertaking such action from the data that we have can create over 300 jobs in recycling and over 1,000 jobs in collection centers. So Africa's potential, especially financial potential, stands to tap up to 7.6 billion US in investment opportunities from circularity in different sectors of the economy and enterprises that can recover from the different sources that I've mentioned. So, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, tapping into all these aspects that I've mentioned, especially this opportunity, calls you as young people, what I call the African sovereign capital. Because this is your continent. Over 60% of the population is you guys. So when I hear you complain, I ask myself, you complain so that who should do it? How can you have numbers which add to your advantage and then you complain to who? So I always challenge you guys. I'm also a young person, regardless, young at heart, even if it's not in terms of age, young at heart. I always challenge the young people to be able to take the lead in establishing enterprises. Wherever you are, start to grab ideas and start to think what you can do and stop complaining and establish enterprises that tap into circularity across the different diverse sectors in the continent today. But the question then is, what is circular economy? I mean, this information we do have out there, but in simple terms, it's just about creating opportunities by eliminating waste in the production and consumption of goods and services. As simple as that. It's as simple as that. It's about the value retention or extending the useful life of a product, either by reusing it or repairing it or refurbishing or repurposing or recycling or remanufacturing. It's about reducing the extraction of the primary raw materials in the production process, unlike the linear and conventional models that we have known that are actually resources are mined and extracted and made into product and then disposed of as waste, which is causing the problem of the planetary crisis that we're facing today, resulting into climate change, into biodiversity loss and pollution and waste that is resulting to the many challenges that are actually facing the continent and the world, of course. And so this approach of making sure that at least we drive a circular economy, reduces material use, redesign materials, and provide products and services to be very less intensive and recaptures waste as a resource to manufacture new materials. And so the question again is, why is it important? Well, it is important because we live on a finite planet. The planet is not infinite. And humanity is reportedly using 1.6 times the amount of services that actually the nature can be able to provide sustainably. And if you were indebted at 160% of the value of your assets, you would know that you are headed towards bankruptcy. And so is the global nature account today. So the circular economy comes in to remediate this and address the triple planetary crisis, which the UN environment actually focuses to work around. How do you make sure that your action in reducing pollution can create opportunities? In reducing waste, you can turn waste to wealth, and at the same time, not put pressure on our biodiversity that also result to dumping waste in landfills that result to emissions. So it's an integrated systemic thinking approach to be able to drive this. And so this prioritization of UNEP's work in circularity, including plastics, including textiles, including electronics, focusing on informing, capacitating, and inspiring shifts towards prioritizing circularity is actually what we do. It's the core of our business. And therefore, circularity is a core area in addressing these aspects I've mentioned, the triple planetary crisis or the environmental risk factors that we face, which is climate change, nature, biodiversity loss, and pollution and waste. So circularity eliminates the need to extract more materials. Yes, it preserves nature and biodiversity. It minimizes waste generation, and in this way eliminates the waste and pollution risk that we face, and reduces the carbon footprint of production and consumption activities to lower climate change and reducing emissions. And so when you're talking of the business of sustainability, the business of circularity, you cannot talk about that in silos, because we need to look at what do you do in a way that addresses other challenges, but without actually adding to those problems. And that is why circularity, because the problems of the world today comes as a result of inefficient use of resources. It comes as a result of unsustainable consumption that has resulted to not only destroying our environment and destroying and degrading our ecosystems and biodiversity, that have resulted to emissions and increasing the temperature rise of our world today, but it's also resulting in polluting our oceans, in littering and dump sites being filled with waste that are resulting to become emission points. And so this, we need to have it. I decided to put it in perspective so that when I get into the reality, because all of you, I call you the young people, and I use this word young very guardedly, is not age, because youthfulness is usefulness. Youthfulness to me is usefulness. Are you useful? Can you bring value? And therefore, that's why I always use this word all the time, that when you are young and you can offer value, then you are youthful. When you are old and you can offer value, then you are youthful. So you, as budding and aspiring entrepreneurs, I would say, stand in the gap of turning theory, knowledge, and enabling policy on circularity into tangible actions. And I use this word theory because theoretizing is easy, but turning this to reality is where the rubber hits the road. And so you are Africa's best bet for prosperity. And therefore, any opportunity you have to play a part, to turn a challenge into an opportunity, to turn simple agricultural waste into fuel briquettes, to start to learn how to do, you go to YouTube instead of watching only music. I love dancing, but also take some time and look at how can waste be turned into other alternatives that you can do. There are a lot of videos out there, even from the work that we do, that we uploaded on YouTube. And therefore, the best way to position yourself is to find out how you can convert what is considered waste in the different production and consumption patterns across the entire value chain into something that's useful, from plastic to food systems to textile and silver accessible opportunity. We're using young people that we're inspiring across the continent, leveraging a tool called innovative volunteerism, which is very simple, inspiring young people and guiding them, just like here today, telling you what you need to do. And of course, you following up on it and playing your part. And then we can come in to close the gaps. And you do that with passion. And in the course of doing that with passion, you close a gap. And that gap you are closing, you are adding value, and that brings you money. And that means you're turning your passion into profit. That's a simple tool, simple idea, simple logic, and we sum it up in 2 words: innovative volunteerism. And these are seeing young people who are converting agricultural waste into fertilizers, and their incomes are increasing by over 560% in profits, while they're recycling over 60,000 tons of waste. We see this in Nigeria, in Cameroon, in Kenya, in Togo, in Ghana, in Zimbabwe, and other African countries. And therefore, we're also seeing others who are recycling plastic tiles into Africa's built environment sector, and they're producing over 1,500 pavers per day that have proven up to about 30% cheaper than conventional blocks, which is 5 to 7 times stronger than concrete, and at the same time much lighter. These are opportunities that are out there. So the question should not be, what is circular economy? The question should be, how do I tap the opportunities in the circular economy? And how do I tap, so building on what works, so that we move down to reality? And that's what I've always talked about. Another entrepreneur, we're seeing them, they are converting fish leather into shoes, jackets, and other accessories, and they're employing over 300 people and creating market opportunities for over 80 local farmers who supply them with leather. So it's a system approach where those who are collecting, those who are processing, those who are adding value, those who are buying, everybody benefits in the process and nothing gets to waste. And in textile, less than 1% of materials used to produce clothing is recycled in the continent today. And this represents a loss of over 100 billion US dollars every year globally. Africa is already tapping into some of this opportunity, but that's not enough. Because the reality is that upcycling secondhand clothes, yeah, that's okay. But in addition to this, young people can focus on converting fashion and textile waste into useful product. We see young people in Nigeria doing this, and they are in big cash market today. And you need to just tap into that knowledge to be able to do so. But to tap into this, there are 4 things that I want to leave you with that you need to really focus on very seriously. And the first is, it doesn't matter what you study in school. So I usually sometimes get baffled when people say, I need to go to business school before I understand business. Well, that's up to you. You can do that. But you need to understand what business actually means, right? It's not just about having a big shop or having a big idea and then going to meetings to meet people and then raising funds. No. The business, in my own contextual reality of definition, is value, closing a gap. Closing a gap to offer value, as simple as that. If there is no drinking water or there is no bottled water in a place, you bring water in alternative, because plastic bottles are polluting the environment. You bring an alternative to plastic bottle and make people see value into it. You are closing a gap, and that will put money in your pocket. That's business. If you can be able to start making apparels from waste and make shoes that are made from waste, so jackets or school bags, and sell them at a very cheaper price, you're solving a environmental problem, and then you're closing a gap where people could not even afford bags to put books to go to school. You're closing a gap and you're solving a problem. That's business. Yet we've been taught that sometimes if something is not too big, then it's not business. Of course, the fundamentals of business needs to fit within the contextual reality of Africa. And therefore, everybody should become a business person in his or her own right to solve problems, and money become a consequence of a problem solved. Because when you offer opportunity to people, you create not just value, but at the same time, money follows value, not the other way around. And therefore, anybody who goes around asking for money to test an idea, show how the idea has worked and solve a problem, and money will follow. Money upfront brings fight and destroy ideas. Ideas upfront brings money and solve problems. That is what I mean by you retool your skills, because if you must have noticed from the examples that I've actually given, circular economy principles can be applied in different areas and in different ways. And you define your niche, regardless of the subject you study. I did physics in my first degree and teaching as a teacher. I did my master's in environment policy and my PhD in climate policy. But at the end of the day, certificates open doors and does not restrict your mind to think beyond, to apply it and drive solutions that can be able to solve problems in community and also environmental solutions. So in this era of internet connectivity, as I said before, you should get to the internet. Do not hesitate to complement your skill. Learn a skill, and with newer areas of application, do not hesitate to enroll for trainings on online programs that address circularity in whatever area that you like. And as an entrepreneur, continuous learning and retooling your skills is key. That takes me now to the second point, which is a very important aspect, because you must take the lead in awareness creation. Awareness creation, while you are learning here today, should not only stay with you. The ideas you're getting from this discussion today, you should also share it to others who may not have the opportunity. Because circular economy is a nascent field as far as its understanding in the mainstream market is concerned. But the best creation that you can create is by demonstrating the economic value of circular economy offerings. For example, like I said earlier, through the work we are doing supporting youth retool their skills, leveraging on innovative volunteerism, investing in waste recovery, fuel briquettes, we are noticing that to increase awareness of fossil fuel briquettes as an alternative to charcoal, the youth are getting the most success because their briquettes prove to be 2 to 4 times more effective and cheaper than charcoal, while at the same time non-smoky, burning faster, not burning better and longer. And it is the economic value that increases the awareness of the briquettes and enables the beating a competition to overcome market entry barriers. And so use the logic of fronting the economic value, what I said before, value, that's all. If you cannot open value here, you are not going to last in any business. And circularity provides that opportunity. That takes me to the third point, which is something that I think as a continent, and I haven't grown up in this continent, in rural Africa where I grew up, I have a thing or two that I know, like most of you might know, that there are a number of challenges to uptake secular economic principles, especially in our economies and also in market entry areas where there are barriers, where products will face competition from conventional products, awareness, skills limitation, limited coordination at policy level, lack of holistic approaches or sectoral integration and finance. All these things we know. Those barriers do exist. But I address the market barriers, awareness, and skills challenges in my entry point up from, which was skills retooling, which is very, very important, awareness. But one of the things that I want you to know, which I will use an example here, is that we know that recovering waste to clean cooking or recovering waste to biofertilizer, which is good not just to nourish the soils, but at the same time is an opportunity for business, will not only address waste challenges per se, but can also overlap to enhance healthy solutions. Imagine over 700,000 Africans die every year because of indoor pollution. Why? Most of them depend on fuel wood. It do not only resort to destroying forests, but it also costs lives. And most of our mothers who live in communities lose their lives, not because they've done anything wrong, just because they don't have an alternative. And therefore, these aspects of looking at clean cooking briquettes, which is turning agricultural waste into fuel briquette, a very simple skill which you can learn today, becomes an opportunity that can then be able not only to enhance health, but for you to create business and save lives. The other is biofertilizer, which I talked about earlier, which enhances the soil and also reduces dependence on agrochemicals, which actually destroy and leach into open environment and cause what is called antimicrobial resistance, that you take antibiotics, they don't work. Why? Because zinc and cadmium and heavy metals leach into the environment, and then you eat them through application of wastewater, which then get into your system, and you become ill and you take antibiotics. And because you're becoming ill and take antibiotics over and over, they become resistant in the process. We call that antimicrobial resistance, which has killed over 147,000 Africans and is projected to kill over 4 million Africans in less than 7 years from today. So why am I bringing this up? I'm talking about this, that you can address multiplicity of challenges from health to environment to creating opportunities by actually leveraging circularity as a business and actually driving solutions for our continent. That takes me to the fourth point, which is tapping the informal sector. I said something and I will say this again, and I really think that you guys can get this, and it's something that is not in the mainstream. One of the biggest challenge, I would say, if climate change, of course, is an environmental challenge of monumental proportion, that is understood. But another big challenge for me personally is that of a narrative for the African continent. We do not verify what we consume. And what I mean by consume is not just in terms of food. We do not verify the information that we consume. And I would say this without any fear of contradiction here, because in a continent like Africa, which is pretty much informal, Africa is an informal continent. And if you look at the informality of Africa when it comes to the mainstream narrative of solutions, that doesn't really happen. Africans themselves, like you and me, don't even champion that lead. And that's why in anything you see me write or say, I cannot miss out to put in perspective that Africa's challenges will not be solved if we forget the majority and the bulk of the biggest constituency of actors who are the informal sector. And therefore, the informality of the African continent must be made to be understood, that the challenges we face in our circularity business must be to address the challenges. Over 930 million Africans use unclean cooking. Over 620 million Africans are energy impoverished. Over 290 million Africans go to bed as we speak today hungry. these realities are of Africa, mostly in the informal sector. And even those who migrate to city, they're not formal because they still live in slums. And therefore, the contextual reality of Africa must always be center stage in your lens of circularity as a business, and at the same time, of you to become energized to say, I will be the one to solve and close the gaps of these aspects that I've mentioned here today. So why am I saying this? The informal sector in the continent today represents up to 80% of the productive population. And these people need goods that can be supplied through the circular economy lens. And to tap them, you need to prioritize a win-win symbiotic relationship with them. And an example through the innovative volunteerism approach I've mentioned, we are leveraging this within our work, and we are guiding young people, the willing young people who are willing to learn, who are willing to retool their skills. And we've seen that they're not only making briquettes, some of them are making biofertilizers, biodigesters to come together and leveraging a structure in the continent that we don't even talk about, communal cooperatives. I grew up in the northwestern part of Cameroon, and my mother used to operate within a simple structure called Njangi, where they come together, like-minded women and men, and contribute little money. And as a result of that, they buy inputs for their farm. They will buy school books for us, and they will even contribute to buying our uniform. That structure of communal cooperative have different names across Africa, but it is a fabric and accessible to the majority of the informal sector. And therefore, coming together with a communal cooperative, what we've been doing is to engage people through that. And they are not only leveraging clean cooking solutions of biofertilizer, they're actually becoming part and parcel of this. And so this symbiosis, we have guided these young people and the lessons we're learning to volunteer their skills and the community to contribute their own skill level and materials can be able to co-create. Why am I saying this? We always start off with this question, I don't have money. No, you don't need money to start. You need ideas, and you also need the ability to foster partnerships within the area in which you want to do something. And you will notice that in-kind contribution will outweigh money. And that takes me now to the last point, which is policy is the biggest driver of change. And Africa is jokingly sometimes discussed as a continent which is like a cemetery for policies. It's true. Every beautiful policy on earth is in this continent. But what's the gap? Implementation. I usually say that there are 5 I's. And these 5 I's is ideas and innovations. Those two, Africa doesn't lack ideas or lack innovations. Africa lacks 3 I's, which the third is incentives. In the incentives we are focused on are only about money. But we need incentives to be able to inspire people to usher themselves to action. Because I've argued this all the time. Through money on someone who is not passionate, that money gets finished with no idea or no transformation. Give a passionate person just an idea, and he will turn that idea into $1 trillion industry. So passion is our new currency of now. And the 4th I is institutions. The institutions in the continent today are great, but they work in silos. They do not synergize. For example, agriculture ministry and energy ministry and transport ministry to connect farms to markets, to add value to what is. We need to synergize and have a common policy that can be able to incentivize actors and actions and provide the enabling environment. But that's not the case. But even young people don't want to work together. You bring ideas, they don't want to ask questions when everyone is there, everything. So I try to make sure that at least I debunk this kind of thing, because influence policy through available channels is a key. And in 2023, up to 29 African countries are set to hold elections at national and subnational level, with up to 60% of those who will potentially vote being youthful. In 3 days from today in Nigeria, they'll be going to election. That's good. One of the biggest populous country in the continent, biggest democracy so far. How many of these youth are thinking of voting in leaders who prioritize the environment? Your guess is as good as mine. Probably very few to know. It's high time that we start, especially as young people, to make sure that you make environmental and climate change and sustainability issue part of the core business of discussions, part of the electioneering process, right? It must become that. And in this way, we can have a place where we have representatives who share in a common vision to be able to tap into environmental action as a source of enterprise production and prioritize policies and incentives like tax breaks to those who are driving transformation in the circularity business. And in 2023, young people can make a vote for environment action and do not neglect this opportunity. So these aspects I've given you constitute not just an opportunity for you, but they give you an opportunity to seize on how to create enterprises and focus and get to understand deeply what this means beyond yourself and your families, beyond your country, but for the continent. Because that's some limitation. We think about countries alone, but we don't think about our actions as individuals, because the purpose of life is to be useful. At the end of the day, as we started off, G asked the question, what would you do at 90? At 90, you should look back and say, I did not waste my youthful years. I contributed, because where you will sit when you are old, show where you stood in your youthful days. Were you useful in your youthful days? Were you valuable in your youthful days? Because value is what makes the difference. And our usefulness in turning challenges to opportunities, not becoming problem makers, but becoming solution providers, is what we must do. But always remember that the one who is unable to dance always say that the yard was tuning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Richard. Questions, guys, questions. Let's use the next 20 minutes, which we still have with